Welcome everyone, and we have with us Aditya Goel, who's joining us from Amsterdam. Aditya is a Web3 strategist with Open Food Chain, and moreover, he's a tech, music, and fitness junkie. He completed his MBA from University of Amsterdam, and he's going to be our speaker for the very first session on the topic decentralized thinking for business and society. So, how are you, Aditya?
Doing okay, Swapnil. How are you doing?
Doing really well, and I'm really excited for this session, and I believe so is everyone else. So, jumping right into the topic, let's start with a very fundamental question of what we are dealing with, which is Web3. You work essentially as a Web3 strategist. So, can you talk a bit more about what Web3 is and how is it different from Web1 and Web2?
Yeah. So Web3 is basically just a way of looking at things when it comes to how the internet has evolved and what we've gotten used to as consumers with it. But essentially, it's the new form of internet that incorporates concepts such as decentralization, such as blockchain technologies, such as token-based economics. The web that you and I are using right now doesn't contain that. But when it does incorporate such elements, it becomes Web3.
So when people like Elon Musk say that, Web3 is just a marketing hype, or people like Jack Dorsey say that, it is just a tool for venture capitalists, what do you think the kind of impact that Web3 actually holds to change a lot, to revolutionize a lot of industries and to change the way the world functions? What's the power of Web3 which we haven't been able to tap yet?
So in we've only experienced the hype days. Like this is the stuff, for people in the audience that have been reading things on their feeds, the things that just goes out online that you're hearing about blockchain and what most people are just saying the word crypto, kind of encapsulating all of these other things as well. It doesn't work like that, right? Right now, we are in the phase where a lot of people subscribed to a number of business models using blockchain technology and using crypto, and they were able to communicate it to, unfortunately, to a lot of people that believed that stuff, right? And we're existing in the phase that came right after a lot of these scams started getting exposed, and the people got exposed to the fact that if you build wrongly with these technologies, it can go wrong for everybody, right? So this new phase right now that the blockchain world is entering is when we're truly building out useful projects for the world, and everybody's going to be ultra validated before they get to market.
When you talk about these scams, can you quote some examples? What kind of experiences have there been earlier?
Personally speaking, if anybody holds crypto, the learning phase in the beginning will make sure that you lose some stuff before you actually understand how to do it correctly. And that's just crypto, right? At the end of the day, you have to learn how to protect all your assets, which could be NFTs, it could be artwork, it could be a deed that exists now in this digital form. So you have to learn what is the heuristic you're going to use to protect your assets now, and know all your wallet addresses in and out and not share them with anybody and have ways to hide them. That's daunting, right? So we're entering that phase right now where we're also fixing all of that.
Hmm. Now that I think everyone has a fair idea of what Web3 is, so tell us a little about your work and what do you do, what Open Food Chain is all about.
Open food chain is, like I said, an open public digital infrastructure for the agri-food industry. Everything that you're eating and you're consuming comes from somewhere. It was produced, it was made by a farmer, it was reared somewhere, and then it was sent along the supply chain journey before it ultimately reached your hands and before it enters your mouth. So, what Open Food Chain does as technology is be able to trace that entire journey So from the farm to the fork, we're able to track that entire journey and identify all those data points and report on those data points. So that's what the infrastructure actually does. But in terms of actually pulling it off, we have to directly interface with an industry. So what we do is we create an industry chain for every agri-food product that's out over there. So far, we have been active in cacao in Peru and Colombia, where where we're developing cacao chain, a chain that's specific for the cacao industry to track and trace cacao. We have fish chain, which is for fish. We have olive oil chain for olives, right? And so on and so forth. And so we established these different chains. In India, what we're doing is we're working with sugar. So we're trying to make sugar chain and very soon, hopefully, even spice chain. And these chains implied would take care of the supply chain journeys for sugar and spice, respectively.
What are the areas in India where you have been focusing on, like where you have been carrying out the projects?
So we're looking for projects all over India. Right now, we have a lovely example of tracking an entire supply chain from its root till the very last mile in Bijnor in Uttar Pradesh, where there's a lot of sugar production going on. And in fact, we have one of the local leaders of Bijnor helping us in that project, interfacing with the farmers to be able to understand how to actually get 1,000 tons of Bijnori sugar fully traceable on the blockchain. And perhaps because it's traceable, that's an added stamp of value that we're providing. Can we justify a slightly higher export price? So we do even try to link them up with grocers abroad where they would be happy to pay maybe higher premium just because that particular product is entirely traceable. And now the farmer from Bijnor actually gains because of using this particular infrastructure.
So fundamentally, what we are trying to do is change the way something has been taking place traditionally since years now. We are trying to change the infrastructure altogether. How do you think that process is gonna be? How is that transition gonna look like? Because we are we need to convince a lot of people to do things in a completely different manner.
Yes.
How is that transition gonna look like? Because it requires, number one, a lot of trust, and also it requires a lot of confidence in our own capabilities as well, that you will be able to you can provide better value to people. So what do you think the transition is going to look like, and number two, what kind of impact does it actually hold for the society as well?
The transition is super simple to understand, is that it's going to take time. That is something that's unavoidable. We've seen this play out in so many different forms that technology isn't really the hard part here. I mean, if we're saying we're going to track things and trace things, it's pretty understandable by most people and even in the audience what tracking and tracing a particular item is. You know, you could visualize that, you could build software around it, right? But we're not talking about that. We're talking about open public digital infrastructure. It's actually a call for cooperation. How do you get a whole industry, a whole sector to cooperate with each other? So most of the work is actually socio-political. It's a lot of policy. It's a lot of understanding of business. And hence the title of this particular topic is that open food chain, yeah, there's a lot of tech involved, but there's a lot of interfacing with stakeholders at the government level, at the private sector level as well. And we have to get everybody to cooperate. That's the real work. So a lot of the effort needs to be put into getting people and all of these entities to actually work together so that, say, something like the sugar industry can be revolutionized. How are they governed? How do they cooperate? What is the technical mechanism through which they actually cooperate? That's the blockchain. That's the easy part.
Now that we have talked about the topic of the session, which is decentralized thinking for business and society, can you give us a little insight on what is it? What is decentralized thinking?
Yeah. It's a term that we've been throwing around because a few years ago, back in the middle part of my career, design thinking was all the rage, right? This term was floating around, and I think a lot of people did many courses. Companies scrambled to teach everybody this new concept so that UX flows turn out a lot better. Blah blah blah, right? And I too was heavily influenced by it because it did clear up a lot of the muck when you actually think about making a product or fixing a system. First you must kind of diagram it correctly, right? And that thought process helped me. And suddenly now in 2020 onwards, post COVID, this crypto blockchain world started to explode, right? And that's when this word decentralized was thrown around a lot. Regardless of the hype, decentralized thinking actually has some benefits because it essentially means, can I design new products and systems in such a way that I'm using decentralized thought where ownership is split, where it's distributed equitably, where it does centralized data control does not exist. How do I distribute that? Where power is there with everybody to act upon the system. So it's a new form of thinking. You can't design any business system very easily with this. You need to understand its dynamics because the dynamics have changed. Central control is what we're usually used to when we're designing a product. But how do you distribute control to everybody and get everyone to cooperate and still make the system work? That is what we're talking about today.
So, can you talk about the role of blockchain technology in Web3 and how is it being used to enable decentralized applications?
Yeah. It's wonderful what you can do to get a group of people to work together if there is technology to deploy governance for them. If we're a random group of people that have come together to do something, how are we going to tell people what to do through email and then hope that they comply? It doesn't work that way. With blockchain technology, with this decentralized approach that I've been talking about, you could design a system where all of us could come together with our NFT, if you want to call it that, call it a coupon if you want to, but with your unique identifier, with your token, come into the system and utilize that token in ways that allow us to make decisions together. So imagine that particular system. How many places can you put that into? You could deploy that in schools. You could have a school run like that. Your trusteeship of schools. You could have land ownership used like that, right? You could run farms like that, farming cooperatives, which is what we're doing with this. So this is what that power of that thinking actually holds. That you can get actually huge groups of human beings to work together because of this governance mechanism that you've deployed through the blockchain.
I remember when the scams of, the apparently when the entire crypto bubble burst and people were talking about how the crypto is not yours till if you don't have the keys. So there were a lot of scams back then which were happening, but how did it impact the business? Are uh, venture capitalists and investors, are they still open to the idea of Web3? How is the investment situation looking like?
No, that's a great question, Swapnil, because yeah, the reputation has been marred very badly. And that's because we're still seeing the words blockchain, crypto, NFT, this, that, all of this together, but we're not seeing these things as separate now. The way blockchain and decentralized technology was used in the past, in many examples, we have felt the negative effects of those now. The scams have all come to light. I don't want to get into what those scams were and which was the worst because to me, all of them were awful. But All of them were happening because people were putting money into centrally controlled systems. They were not decentralized. Power was not with them. The keys, like you mentioned, were not really with the people in most of those cases,
Yeah.
because they were locked out of their money. When they needed to take it out, they weren't allowed to take it out. So, this is where decentralized comes in, right? It's instances like this where experiencing the fallout of all of those business models tanking in front of us, and just years before that, they were appearing like angels in the media. Lot of positive PR, and there was no way to know really until you experienced it yourself how bad that crash actually is. One by one, these companies being exposed. So I thought this would be a good topic to talk about, because if people are considering getting into the blockchain and using blockchain technology to actually build things, learn from the past, because the scam models are all done. Instead of having these scammy models, you actually have models that impact society. And you move away from terms like NFTs, like tokens. Eventually, you don't even call them that anymore. They just become part of society. Then you've actually done well in Web3, because that's the actual goal, where it interfaces with our real life seamlessly.
So, how can actually businesses leverage Web3 technologies to improve their operations and create new value for customers? And with
It de-
examples.
okay, it depends on the kind of work that the businesses do, right? There is a revenue positive, profitable, and sustainable way of doing anything, is what we believe. You know, so you could also look at Web3 technology and blockchain technology, and all of these fancy terms. I'm not going to get into what these are, because these are things that you should be Googling and understanding, because they'll make sense to you in a particular way, right? Because they're all building blocks. How you build with them is up to you. You want to be somebody that designs a scam, you will be caught because you made a scam. But if you want to be somebody that impacts society and actually pulls this off in the right way, then please go ahead and do this responsibly. But these are just building blocks.
So, big tech giants like, Meta or maybe Google, do you think they will ever transition towards Web3? Because in the end, the major business, what the common belief is that the major business is from the database that is collected. But with decentralization, that aspect is eliminated altogether. So why would the thing is the common belief is that sustainability and revenue and profitability does not go hand in hand a lot. So why would the big tech giants transition towards Web3?
They all will, and then they'll drop it, and then they'll do it again. I wouldn't be worried about the tech giants entering Web3 or not, because it's a need and demand based thing at the end of the day. As you trend, more people enter. When you detrend, less people enter. If you look at the bird's eye scope of things, there are two trending things right now in tech, and the first is AI, right? They're holding the gold medal right now in terms of
Yeah.
what people are really after. And the second is blockchain. Do you see where I'm coming from? So tech giants coming in and dabbling in things, I wouldn't be too concerned about. I would be more focused on who's building some beautiful things at the moment, during this slump, if you want to call it that. Because it's now is when, if you can convince people and get relationships to be built, while making businesses in Web3 or not, it's a beautiful time to do it. And you were asking about how the funding environment was. The funding environment is essentially something that does not um, it does not follow traditional rules. But the basics are that if we're in a market like this, people are not going to invest in you very easily. So
So
real revenue flows are what. are necessary right now.
So while supply chains innovation can happen beautifully when thought about in a decentralized manner, this is a topic that you wanted to talk about as well. So would want to discuss it. What are your opinions?
On supply chain innovation,
Can happen beautifully when thought about in a decentralized manner.
yeah, it can happen beautifully when done in that way. In fact, it's one of the oldest examples of how blockchain can be used to completely control and disrupt an industry, and that's the supply chain world. So every product that moves on a journey in a supply chain, right? Every product can have an ID, can be a digital product existing on the blockchain, and hence, as it goes on its journey, it can be entirely tracked on the blockchain because you know where exactly this digital asset is going as it moves on that journey. And you wouldn't be the only one to have access to that data. I would too. Other people in the audience would also have access to this. We would all have access to this because it's decentralized. So there's a lot of benefits in that because so far the supply chain world in almost every industry across the world experiences money loss due to time lag while transmitting data between two of the stages in the supply chain. That time taken, as much as it's reduced and as little data as we can get it to, the more profitable the entire supply chain becomes, more efficient it becomes. So that's an operational benefit of bringing it onto the blockchain. In terms of getting industries to come together, how do you get all of the big sugar players across India to come together and work together to bring traceable sugar to reality? How do you do that? You have to give them a governance mechanism and you have to get them to cooperate in using some technological form. Like we are cooperating to be on this call right now. We're all using this particular software that you have built to be together. This is, in a sense, kind of governing us, right? But for how do you get a whole industry of producers to cooperate and govern each other? You do so through the blockchain. So, and that's how big what the impact supply chain receives from something like from blockchain technology.
And this is the kind of supply chain innovation that Open Food Chain has been working on since the time it began. I would like you to talk a little more about Open Food Chain and the kind of small victories that you did plan for yourself and were able to achieve. What were some of the failures that you had to face, or not failures, but challenges that you had to face? And what's the future looking like for you?
Okay, so just a bit about Open Food Chain in that so just provides the right context. Open Food Chain is a Netherlands-based, Amsterdam-based company started by Marike. I joined about close to a year ago, and I have just returned to Amsterdam after having spent about 6 months in India on behalf of Open Food Chain. Right? And so within this scope of time, I've had to actually get Open Food Chain, which is a new technology, infrastructure, yada, 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 about agriculture, and get it to a country like India, where there is no need for ESG compliance, which is something that we solve, right? There's no real need for that. It's not a pressing topic the way it is in the EU at the moment. So I came here and I had to establish different use cases to people that really weren't friendly towards the blockchain. It would be clubbed with crypto and we would be rejected over and over again. So in terms of challenges, if you are somebody coming from a non-trending industry because of all of these scams, you have a very good technology, one of the biggest problems is communicating that to people in a fair and easy way, in a way that they understand, in a way that they actually adopt your tech. And there are ways we've been making some strides, because if you make a honest, sensible case to somebody that your product or your infra can actually change things for the better, then they actually listen. And what we do every day is we actually make that case to as many people as possible. You get some, you don't get some, but that's part of the journey.
So, how can the blockchain technology help to address some of the social and economic challenges facing society today? Because that is one thing that Open Food Chain has been working on. So, things like wealth inequality and data privacy. Uh, Definitely, blockchain technology's major purpose is to solve those problems. The point of decentralization is to uh, solve those challenges, and that is one thing that Open Food Chain has been doing. But how can the blockchain technology help to address these issues?
We could go on the whole day talking about the number of ways every single thing that you have said right now can be impacted by blockchain technology. In short, all of them can be impacted by blockchain. Wherever you have things like identity, blockchain has a huge say in that. You can do a lot with identity, just the concept of identifying, the need for identifying something or somebody. It's Swapnil, you could think of 1,000 places where that's important, right? Digital and non-digital. You need an ID to enter the gym. You could have an ID to play a game. All of that can be built on this blockchain technology, as because you can exist as a unique entity on that blockchain. All of this is possible.
But can you discuss some of the potential risks and challenges which are associated with Web3 adoption, and how can they be mitigated?
You uh, have to handle a lot of mistrust and miscommunication. You don't want people to perceive differently. You want to be very specific about what you're selling. And scam language can now be identified. Most people kind of get a sense, if you see it, it's like, oh, this could be a scam. You kind of intuitively know now because you've seen it so much, right? So you can't talk in those ways. You can't communicate your tech in those ways any longer. You need to be able to be very clear about your value proposition. In our case, we are bringing an open public digital infrastructure for the agri-food industry. And all the supply chains of those agri-food industries will improve as a result of using our tech. So any business that is using this kind of technology needs to be able to define it well and do so in a very clear and concise manner.
And in the coming years, how do you see the Web3 landscape evolving, and what should the businesses and societies be doing to prepare for these changes?
I mean, I'd be surprised if we still call it Web3 then, Swapnil. I don't, it doesn't matter. It'll fuse with AI, it'll dance with quantum computing. I don't know. The beautiful part about Web3 is that we now have a chance to interface with each other a lot more easily. We have a chance for our digital and real lives, whether we like it or not, interface with each other as well, because that's what Web3 does. And we're entering that age. So the products that come out now post all of the scams and post a great education of so many people about what blockchain and Web3 is, unlike 3 years ago, 4 years ago. This is a good time to build products. And even if you don't have funding, build those products because it's not very expensive to. You will get it when the markets rise again.
I think the future for Web3, if we ever, again, if we call it that in future, but I think it is inevitable that uh, the the infrastructure is going to shift towards Web3. And yeah, I mean, as when the astronomer Galileo, when he quoted that it's not the sun revolving around Earth, it is the Earth revolving around the sun. When that happened, people made fun of him, and he was considered to be an insane person. I think that is particularly what's happening with Web3 as well, and people are just saying that it is some uh, j- it is just some random things you're talking about, which is not possible and it is not actually practical. But yeah, in future, I think the world is going to shift towards Web3, and people will be accepting it as the new normal. So that is pretty inevitable, I feel.
Yeah, I agree with you. For real, and for our audience who's watching, the reason I'm grinning is it's just true whether you like it or not, because some of these things are super logical. Your lives actually improve if good tech actually is deployed, and good tech is on its way. All the nonsense is clearing out.
So we'll open the public chat for audience to ask a few questions from Aditya, and you can type in your questions on the chat box. And in the meantime, now that we have the public chat is enabled, and anyone who wishes to ask questions can send in their questions, and I'll be asking those questions here. And in the meantime, we have talked a lot about tech, and as per your own description, you are a tech and music enthusiast, like history and music. What's the kind of music do you listen to?
Oh man, it's honestly too diverse and without a pattern for me to be able to say. I go by my liked songs on my Spotify, and if I just looked at it there is no pattern. You could have a lot of really good old school R&B and suddenly like straight up Punjabi music for like 12 tracks, and then maybe some Kannada songs after that, some dance songs, and then there's a lot of this. It's quite mixed.
I
But I
mean that.
play my own music myself. I play the guitar, so that's
Oh,
actually a bit more fun.
interesting. But yeah, I
But
mean, okay, so Bhavtosh asked, what advice do you have for business and individuals who are just starting to explore Web3? And what resources should they use to continue learning about the space? I think this question is applicable to students as well. If someone just found interest in the tech, blockchain technology, Web3, what are the kind of resources they should use to continue learning? Because the internet is very misleading at the moment.
Mhm.
So
No,
how can a
it's a
person
good question.
find value?
It's a good question. There are courses I'm sure that are out over there right now that you could use, but because this technology is actually changing so quickly, it really helps for you to be self-informed as as much as you possibly can. I would start at something as basic as what is that business you're talking about. So if it's like, for example, you have a clothing store, so fashion, right? And then type the word Web3 next to it and Google that. And most likely the first 5 to 10 search hits would give you the enough primer information to raise certain questions in your head, especially when you're like just starting off, right? And then after that, what I would say is reach out to guys like me, type in the word Web3 on LinkedIn and send messages to guys like me, and have open conversations. Those people that charge for information beyond a certain point, of course, I wouldn't talk to them. But talk to those people that are willing to have conversations with you to kind of see how your business is and then how Web3 could be applied. Because you don't need Web3 for all your business all the time. You need it in specific sections that are applicable to generating revenue or value for your business. If you'd like, in terms of links or something, I could possibly share that with Swapnil, and he would, could share that with all of you later on. Maybe it would help.
I think that would be
But
great. Yeah.
have conversations is my point. That really helps.
Great. So Devansh's question is, with the market prices of major cryptocurrencies declining significantly and the trading volume of NFT slowing down, how does the future of crypto look like?
I mean, it has a future. It's a future. It is not over. That's the difference. It has a future, and that future is that the way we have been using cryptocurrencies, the way we have been using NFTs in the past, will now change. Are you going to be excited by a new NFT cartoon collection now selling for 2 ETH? Is that going to make you? Yeah, it's not going to make you feel excited any longer. You're not going to buy it. If I sold you a club membership with NFTs right now, are you going to buy that model? You're not going to buy it anymore because it has been overdone and too many scams have
Yeah.
happened, right? So, of course, the volume of NFTs trading has significantly slowed down because that way of doing things has come to an end. I would rather ask if, for example, NFTs are reused in a more better way, say for movie tickets, say for even for farming, there's a way to have NFTs for every
Yeah.
crop. Um, what if you did it that way? And then the price of crypto goes up again. So there's many ways of it. I wouldn't look at the future of crypto. I would say that any tech, as long as it's not culty, has a life. And if you want to learn about it, really try to learn about the fundamental things about it. Because it's not about things slowing down or going up. It's honestly what you make of it.
I think it's an interesting perspective how NFTs can be reused in a better way, because for me it was a, a dying thing, because I was never too fond of NFTs as a concept as well. But yeah, it's a good perspective. So Sachin asks, can you discuss some potential risk or downsides to adopting a decentralized approach and how these risks can be mitigated?
Yeah, there are. It's fair, Sachin. That's a fair question because imagine if you're talking about getting stakeholders to come together using your blockchain mechanism, right? And all of them have distributed ownership. You have to find the ideal way of getting these people to work together, and do so in a technological um, way of being, right? Because they have an NFT or some kind of access token that allows them entry into an interface where they can make certain decisions. This is all built on the fact that they will do it this way. They will want to adopt it. You'll have to convince them to adopt it. There is that work involved. So if I talk about risks, your risk of time taken for people to adopt your tech, that is always there, right? Um, that's a huge downside. You have to spend the time to actually deploy it and get it known to people, and yeah, that's just that you cannot avoid. That trust needs to be built again. In terms of like other risks involved, I wouldn't. As long as it deploys fairly and legally, then you should be okay. So good design of that decentralized is probably most important and best way to mitigate these risks.
I hope, Sachin, that answers your question. And lastly, we have Anushka who's asking, how can businesses and organizations transition from a centralized to a decentralized model? And what challenges might they face during the process?
Okay. Firstly, it depends on what your business does, okay, and where you want to apply blockchain and decentralized thinking. Which part of your business you wouldn't probably want to do it for your whole business, but maybe a certain division or a section or a particular project in a particular place. But first, they must identify where they want to impact something. So, for example, Coca-Cola might want to track its bottles from factory all the way to retail, right? So that is the only place where they would deploy blockchain technology in this theoretical picture that I'm drawing, right? And that's it. So what they would do is they would essentially look at how their old way or old system functioned and where the data was actually stored and held and manipulated. And then we would convert that to blockchain by just basically distributing the ownership and access of that data, that very same data on that supply chain journey, and import it to our blockchain. So now all the products are logged as uniquely identified assets that are moving on a chain that is digital and available and known to us. So the challenges they might face are innumerable. Again, cooperation, fighting inertia, the usual human aspects of these. Because if human systems perfectly matched what technological systems said, then we'd live in a very different world, but it doesn't work that way.
So basically, that transition needs to be slow and start from figuring out what part of your business you want to decentralize.
Yeah, stage wise.
Uh, I do not see any further questions. So I think it's safe to wrap up the session now. Thank you so much, Aditya, for joining us today. It was a really insightful session for all of us, especially for all the audience and for me. I hope people found a lot of interest in a very new topic for them, which is Web3, blockchain technologies, decentralization, and they found some interest in the kind of work that you do as well and the kind of thing you are trying to build through Open Food Chain. And you can reach out to him on LinkedIn. You can definitely start a dialogue with him regarding any topic that you have in mind related to the theme. And yeah, I mean, it was a really great session. Thank you so much, Aditya, for being a part of this.
Thank you, Swapnil. Thank you for having me, and thank you to everybody for listening.